work is always going to be there. There's always going to be a new idea. There's always going to be an investor that wants to fund you or that wants to do all these things. But at the end of the day, are your relationships filling your bucket? Is your soul being fulfilled?
My name is Cody May from Sheridan Street. I'm joined with my co-host and co-founder of the Real Estate Growth Academy, Vikram Deol. We have a very, very, very special guest with us today. Raquel is here in the house.
I'm going to share some stuff before before we let Raquel talk. So Raquel and I have known each other for the better part of a decade, which is shocking to me that, that we're still friends because we lost contact for, 3 or 4 years. And it's amazing how when you attract amazing people into your life, you don't even realize that it's been so long, like 4, 5, 6 years had passed and we hadn't talked and we just jumped right back into it. And we met actually at an event 2013, 2014, that we were both a part of a coaching program with. And instantly I was like, oh my God, this woman is a freaking rock star. Like she's running family, she's running household, she's got investments, she's like managing teams, she's got like a growth strategy to take her into multiple markets. Like this chick's freaking badass. And she runs like 13 miles a day for fun. I was like, who are you? Like you just have this really powerful aura around you. And what you've done since we met is nothing less than extraordinary. And I wouldn't expect anything less from you, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a special intro because you are an amazing woman and entrepreneur. And we are really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Vikram, for that. I would like, can I hire him as a PR?
You just send me $20. Venmo, please. $20 in Colombia goes far.
You know what I think is really interesting is like people read like what they remember about you. It's always the highlights and, the whole 13 miles or, flying from state to state, running these teams, my health journey became and like started because I was constantly always working. So I started getting into fitness competitions and different things, but that was like my break from work because I knew that I had to have the discipline if I was going to compete. And that was the only way that I could get out of the never ending role of business.
It's so funny, like the higher level you get, the more you realize like there's certain things that are super important. And it's so easy when you're passionate about what you do, like to stay in the grind for 14, 15, 16 hours, because even though it's work, it doesn't like you're fulfilling a soul purpose and you get to help people. It's somewhat selfish because it feels really good. But it's also somewhat unhealthy if you don't stop and make the time for other people. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a great segue because being a mother, being a wife, right, being a high performing entrepreneur is something that is not for everybody because it's hard to manage all of those tasks. Like I don't like to use the word juggle because you're not juggling them. You're truly managing these tasks. Yeah. So maybe that's a good starting point. You've started to shift your focus over the last maybe 6, 8, 9 months, maybe a little bit more than that. Time flies when you're having fun. But you've started to shift your focus from working with just large teams to helping a lot of lady entrepreneurs really manage their lives and their businesses and grow and scale and think bigger. How is it being a mom? Because Cody doesn't know, and I surely don't know, and an entrepreneur with 2 young children and a husband and 18,000 businesses.
Yeah, I think that it's different being a woman. I think as you look back and as you were telling that story, a lot of it was ego driven, right? Being the number one in our market, having the highest GCI, going after those plaques, being the largest team and all these multiple things. And then something happened, I lost a best friend. And so that really changed. And she was like the second mom to my kids. And when you have her son in your arms after his mom has passed and you have to take him to school that Monday, it puts a lot of things in perspective. As much as I was out there saying like, it's about a legacy, but what I didn't realize because I was moving so fast that there are relationships that do get neglected along the way. And so that is where I started helping women, because everybody needed an Amy in their life. She was my next door neighbor. So she was the one that when I had a bad day with the team, I was telling her. She was taking my kids. And so she actually ran my team, and she was one of my top producers that did 100 deals a year. And she didn't do it because she wanted to. She wanted to help a friend. And so I think that when things and life circumstances happen, and I think they happen for a reason, and it's probably one of the hardest things that I had to do, even more so than being a mom, is because this kid is my son's age. They're best friends. That's how we met. And to take him to school, and where your community, because we lived in like this golf course community, knows exactly what happened to your mom through a car accident. They're going to ask questions to a 9, 10-year-old. And like, how do you go back and go, we're going to get your backpack at mom's house, you know, with no father to be found. And his father, you know, found out like he had a girlfriend at the time. So dealing with all that, how do you explain that to a child? And I think I've learned to slow down and really go more into like, it's cool to build something massive. It's cool to have like its purpose, but what to you is purpose and what meaning? Even if you had all the money in the world, even if you had all the investments and all the other things, and you were making an impact every day, at the end of the day, like who's going to be with you?
The entire time you were saying that, like, you know, like I just felt this presence to you. Like there's clearly a presence here, even right now, around like just being present in the moment. Like when you're managing a high performance team and you're going through all these things, and like all of a sudden something really, you know, life changing happens. How do you remain present when you're still trying to build something big? Because I think that can happen a lot for high performers, is like, they're so focused on the vision. They're so focused on the goal and the legacy that they want to leave. And I'm guilty of this, that they often neglect the present moment. How do you balance the present moment to the big dream that you have for your future?
I think early on, and it's really in high performers, we have a tendency to put a shell over us and say that like, I'm just going to dig into work because it's what I know, and like numb ourselves. And it's very easy to do because there's lots of things to do. And there's lots of people that are coming at you, especially when you have different leaders in different states. And so what I had to do was take a time out. I think the kid, that little boy, Skylar, like really rocked my world. Him getting up in the middle of the night crying, like, I still have tears today because it's as if it was yesterday. Like, what do you say to that? Like, there's no amount of money that could fix this problem, right? So I am always present. And I think that's why I really value relationships today more than ever, because I think that you can't replace relationships. Whether you break them or burn them in business, you always remember. You always remember. And like at the end, and my mentor, Kent, Sarah Blakely's husband, and he talks about this a lot too, which is Jesse Itzler, about your life resume. Everyone, especially I think in the industry, and we were taught up at like the highest GCI and all these accolades. And at the end of the day, it's like, how many more summers do you have with your parents? How many more summers do you have with friends? Because work is always going to be there. There's always going to be a new idea. There's always going to be an investor that wants to fund you or that wants to do all these things. But at the end of the day, are your relationships filling your bucket? Is your soul being fulfilled? I didn't think we were going to get to like soul and like internal things on this. I thought we were talking about prospecting and mindset.
No. That's surface level. We're past surface level. The most successful people I know, right? Financially, fitness, health, families, right? Like some of the major things all have a major spiritual component, but they always have time, right? They always have time. Like if I call them, they might not pick up immediately, but they call me back. And I'm like, how is this person who's worth X trillions of dollars able to call me back? And my own father is so busy, right? Like what the, it doesn't make sense, right? Like how do some people make so much time and some people have zero time in your perspective? Because it's powerful.
That really came to the foresight when I went into the prop tech space after real estate. So I consulted and was a chief revenue officer for a startup. And I worked for my first billionaire. And I could not believe how much free time this man had. And
Right.
of course, I am a person of question. I want to ask him all the things. What are some of the lessons? What can I shortcut in my learning curve? And I think as you become more and more successful, you start to find your purpose, and time isn't something that you don't get back. This time I've committed to you guys. I've said yes, and I've said no to a lot of other things. Right. And so to answer your question, Cody, is that I'm fully present when I do say yes and I commit. And that's and everything that we do, whether it's even a basketball tournament with my kids, I'm trying to make an experience out of it, because we go there for business, but we get to have fun later. We get to play bigger later.
Can we talk about the mindset behind that? Because I feel like we've gone deep, and I want to go into the psychology of how you even get there, because I find that, as a mom, how do you become present with your kids? As a business owner, how do you become present with your staff when fires happen? Because as a real estate agent, fires happen all the time. You're with your kids, and all of a sudden a buyer calls you and it's like, this is super urgent. This has to happen now. How do you create the balance to be present in your life while potentially, we know vast majority of real estate agents only make $42,000 a year and they're broke. So there's an element of I need to provide for myself and I need to build something bigger, but I also want to make sure I don't neglect the relationships that I have along the way. How did mindset, psychology, how do you build that?
I think it happens through experiences and what you value time is, or what you value things around you. And so I made a vow to myself when I started this business, because I got in the business really young at 19. I was a young kid in the office. And what I would see with moms is they were taking their kids, answering the phones, and they would be at my office because I was like the cool auntie and so that I'd have coloring books for them, because I knew that mom had to do a deal, or a client was coming in the office to sign a contract, and I wasn't allowed to have kids. There was a point in my life where a doctor told me that I couldn't have kids. And I said, if I ever get the chance to have kids, I'm not taking them to my office and keeping them at 10 o'clock at night there. Wow. Because I don't want them to look back and say, all my mom did was work. Even though there is, we worked because we needed money on the table. We needed different things. And so I just had boundaries because of a situation. It's all choice. And I think that even when I talk to women today, it's how do I be fully present when a client does call me? That was setting the expectations when you took on the client. That was setting up the, second base. If they call during my kids' game, somebody is picking up the phone on my team. Wow. Or I'm having somebody in my office do it.
Building love. It's like what I used to say to my team members. I'm like, if you were in a listing appointment for $2 million and your phone rang, would you pick that up? Ring. No, of course not. So why not just make your personal life as important as a listing appointment? Right. It's
I think that sometimes in this ego business, and I love all the real estate agents, is that we sometimes think that when we don't, it takes practice of not being needed. So what I find too, when people are top producers and they finally have their team leverage, there's almost a side of depression. There's almost of I'm no longer needed. Right. So I think it's all part of your growth journey. There's no right or wrong. I just think that everyone's got to experience something different for it to click. Mm-hmm. For them to say, hey, you know what, there's misaligned expectations. I'm probably not going to be as present when you call me after 5, but I have so-and-so that you can reach, and they will know everything that's going on with your transaction.
It's crazy. You talk about a lot of it sounds like it comes down to pre-framing the conversation to make sure that the buyers and the people in your life have proper expectations. And this happens even when we, take on clients, or, I've chatted with our clients, when they take on clients, the more that they can set the expectation of this is the way it is, the better results they have with their clients. I'm curious to know, when you work with a larger team, what are 2 to 3 things that, small to medium-sized teams could be doing in order to operate at the level of a large team in order to kind of get to where they want to go in the business?
I think it's going to be different for everybody, because every team or rainmaker has a different skill set. I always say that there's no right or wrong way to build a business. It's either going to be effective for you or not. Mm-hmm. And that's why when we sometimes think about models, what model would be totally different for someone, it's going to be totally different for Vikram and for Cody because of their personality and what what they love in the business, what's their zone of genius. right? Some people will say go door knock on 100 doors. If you told me that, I probably wouldn't be in this business because I hated it. I was being chased by dogs, right? But I found sphere and I found relationships and referrals and I found systems around that first that gave me those wins to kind of go into other things. So when it comes to probably a team operating at a high level, I think communication is key. Leadership is key. You can always go into any team and figure out some of the gaps. I could look at by asking a few questions. It's like going into their sales team or even their ISA team and asking them, how many calls did you guys do? And how many appointments did you guys do? And the way they answer, you're like, you don't even love this job. Like, why are you here? If you can't sell me on that, why are you on my phones?
That's so funny. It's I wrote a post about that on LinkedIn today. It's like too many people get into business like real estate for the wrong reasons. And then when it comes down to doing the work, they don't want to do the work. Like we had a client that she was brand new in the business. She started maybe 6 or 7 months ago. Sweetheart, right? Super sweetheart. And she's like, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm getting out of real estate. I'm like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. She's like, I don't like the grind. I don't like the schedule. I don't like the constant hustle. The decision was made, right? And you can only help when people ask, right? But people don't know how to set boundaries because they run off of scarcity, right? They're always running from the next deal to the next deal to the next commission to the next commission. And if you never stop and realize that you are manifesting scarcity, you will continue to manifest scarcity your entire career. And you have to stop at some point and say, wait a minute, how do I manifest abundance, right? How do I create that abundant mindset in my life? But if you're constantly running and you're constantly making yourself, oh no, Vikram, I have to make myself available for this client. Why? Well, if they call me, I need to be there. I'm like, why? Well, they're freaking out. No, it's because you didn't set boundaries. So the communication is important, but the average real estate agent who's got $40,000 in GCI, that's not net, that's total gross, right? They're struggling. They're on the struggle bus to basically quitting, which is, it's a broken industry, right? It's a broken industry.
I think a lot of people think that real estate is sexy. And it's gotten really sexy from, even flips are sexy on TV. But the real deal is it doesn't always happen that way as much as we would like for it to happen that way. Right. And so I think that we come into this notion of flexible hours. It's no different than network marketing. I mean, there's a lot of models out there. Flexible hours, you can make as much money as you want, but you still need the skill set to actually sell. You need to be a salesperson if you are going to create sales and get commission because no one's going to pay you.
Yeah, I think a lot of real estate agents treat this business like a cashier or a clerk. It's like I'm gonna go out and show a bunch of homes, and this person's gonna choose. So I'm curious, how does that shift happen for what do you teach your teams in order to do that shift, become a salesperson if they're not naturally? And my follow-up question is can people learn to become better salespeople, or do you think it's innately inside of somebody?
Well, I think that most rainmakers have a hard time because we just have never done it before hiring. I mean, I failed so many times at hiring agents. I thought, oh my God, somebody would come in, they'd interview them, they're going to rock it. Their first year, they're going to be rookie of the year. And then they didn't have the discipline. Yeah. But then and another guy comes in and I'm like, there's no way he's going to make it. And sure enough, he's one of my top agents. Yeah. I think you can teach it. But you do have to have resilience. You do have to have grit. You do have to have some type of mindset. As long as they have the motivation and the discipline, I think you can teach being a salesperson. I wasn't a salesperson before coming into real estate or before selling cell phones. I had to learn it. I had to learn how to build rapport and mirror people and all those other things. And I think for some, it comes really natural. And for some, it's, you're an introvert and you have to get out of your shell.
Why are people so resistant to calling themselves a salesperson in real estate? I get there's a negative connotation with salespeople, but the used car salesperson is kind of like a story of the past, right? It's kind of like a story of the past that people still cling on to. Why are people so resistant? I told somebody, he's like, well, you're a salesperson. I'm like, bro, what's your title? He's like, real estate sales. I'm like, it sounds like you're a salesperson too. So why do you feel like there are people that are so resistant to learn the skills necessary to be a high performer? Or do you think that they don't even realize it's in their that they need to have those skills, because it's out of sight, out of mind. Nobody talks about it.
I think if they're resistant to it in the front end, especially in the shift, this is what I'm telling a lot of my teams right now, is that you want to get out of is this for me? Am I going to coach you for a year and you're still not going to do a deal? Because that impacts your revenue. And one of the first things we do is try to scale their revenue where they're leaving money on the table. So you're actually allocating company resources, whether it's your leadership team, whether it's a trainer, whether it's them watching videos, whether them using all the copy machine, they are dragging your P&L, whether you know it or not. Yep. Because it's minutes that you have to answer their call, and they still don't want to show up for the regular training, but they want to call you and say, why is this not working?
I had a client, I love her to death. We're still working together. And she finally let go of a couple of her initial team members, right? And they were an anchor dragging her down, like to the point where her admin staff didn't want to come to the office anymore because all they did was complain. They didn't show up. They didn't want to do the work. And we'd done all the models and the role playing. Like we had talked about everything. This is what you need to say, right? Like all the things, right? It took her probably 3.5, 4 months, but it was her first time firing people and she likes them. So how does a team leader that's got dead weight, horrible term, it's got people pulling the machine down, how do they have those conversations and how do you get them to have them sooner?
I think number one, it's they got to look at themselves as a leader because it's a culture they created, and you got to be real. And it took a long time, but when I was coaching at the same place where we were at, I mean, one of the first things she said was like, you got to fire everybody. Like you are majority of the business and it's not a business. So you don't have salespeople, but I had to take ownership of saying, you know what? I created that. I spoon fed them leads. That's the culture I created. So they didn't know how to prospect on their own. Right. And I micromanaged them as soon as they got the client. So I think that number one, as a team leader or as a rainmaker, is you got to own it. Own where you're at.
Yeah.
Have some awareness and own it. And then two is like, what are we going to do about it? I can either drag them on and create a new set of standards and say like, hey, we're having to come to Jesus. We're moving in a different direction. The market has shifted. And here are some new standards. It's on me. I totally apologize. I failed you guys as a leader, but I do not want you guys to not be successful in this business.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to come on the ride with me, here's where we're going.
Yeah. Here's the direction.
How do you get a team leader that doesn't have a Raquel or a Vikram or a Cody to notice that what they're doing is actually like, I'll use my dad as an example. He's not in real estate. He's a physician, but he doesn't have set prices. So like one person pays one price for an IV, the other person pays another price. So like the nurses have to ask him for almost everything. I was like, Dad, just, it's $200 and everybody gets 10% off if they ask for it and be done with it. He's like, oh, well, they're going to, I said, if they don't come to you, you're already too busy anyways. It doesn't matter. Like, what do you care? It doesn't impact your life. Well, I want to help everybody. I'm like, you're losing time and energy on these things. And, he's been in business for 40 years now, 35 years. How do you get the person who doesn't have the coach and doesn't want to have the coach, but they're listening to this podcast? How do you get them to take that ownership? Like, how do they do a self-analysis and a diagnostic on themselves without somebody saying, hey, this is dragging you down? And how do you let them see it? Because a lot of them they see it and they feel it, but they don't understand it.
It's just like when we train people how to do scripts and they're so good in the room. And then you tell them to go to the phones and they are like stumped. I'm like, what happened? So I think number one is like everyone, like you can't want it more for you than your clients or your dad or whatever. So he may be okay running his business that way. It's going to come down to, is this in alignment with your goals of where you guys want to get to? Do you want to make that $10 million? Because what we're doing today is not going to get us there, but we got to make small increments. Now, if you tell me, hey, we've adjusted the goal, Raquel, and I'm okay with this, then tell me, because we have a different plan for that.
Let's speak to the high performer for a second, because I think that, many agents want, they want bigger and they want to have an experience and they want to have a different life. And that's like a lot of people get into business for one of three reasons. So more money, more purpose, more opportunity. So I'm curious to know, like, how can that team leader attract other high performers? Like, what is that? Like, what do you teach your clients that, might be starting a, small to medium to large size team? How do they find the talent, the diamond in the rough And how do they create a culture that cultivates greatness or cultivates high performance in a team?
There's a couple of things. Number one is knowing your core values, knowing your mission, knowing your standards in the company before you go bring somebody else. Clean that up first before you start attracting people. And the way you're going to attract people is how you show up. And I think it takes time. The bigger the vision, the better the producers come, right? You can't have a $10 million vision and act like you're at 500,000 or have a cap, because a lot of times when I talk to people that are recruiting top producers, especially in this shift, when talent, I think, is less expensive than it's ever been, and then people are making moves, is you can attract $1 million producer if you don't have the confidence, if you don't feel like your vision's big enough. There's no way that Cody could run a big business and attract some of the people. And I'm not saying like go put an ad on Indeed or go put an ad on LinkedIn. You actually have to know that like I've got confidence, and I've recruited a lot of agents in my career and saying like, I want the number one agent at Remax. I want the number one agent, and here's how I'm going to do it. It's no different than when you got recruiters recruiting players for teams to teams. They're scoping them out. They're learning how they talk. They're learning about all the things. And a lot of times it might be you learning about yourself of what you really want. You may say that like, hey, I want to partner with a top producer, but high D's and high D's, if you don't know how to deal with it, you guys will be at battle. Right. I mean, when we did our expansion team, that's all I was hiring was high Ds from our regional directors. But if you don't know how to handle them, you're going to build something that you absolutely hate.
There's a lot of things that we can go down with you because you have such a vast knowledge of business and entrepreneurship, and you've done so much. We are in a shifting market right now. We are in a very weird market, and it's the first time, in my opinion, that we've been in some kind of market like this because we have so much new money and we have such weird monetary policies. What are you talking to your clients about right now? Like, how are you helping your clients to not just stay afloat in this shift, but how can they thrive in this shift, Raquel?
Yeah, it's no different than I was a team leader. And I think this gave me like my stars and stripes back in the days. I was a team leader in 2007 to 2010. So I took over a failing brokerage and turned it around to one of the top 10 in the country for Keller Williams. And a lot of people doubted me, and a lot of people were scared and nervous. I had agents that were being foreclosed on a daily basis. I had people walking out, and I had cars being repossessed because in 05, 06, they were order takers, right? They didn't need the skills. And so I think it's a little different now. And I think some markets have already shifted. And I said, regardless of whatever happens in your market, good business people and top producers that run their business like a business will thrive and find opportunities.
Yeah.
So now it's time to clean up shop. You have people leaving. Awesome. The only way that we can fix that is we either increase production and we got to get tight with our training, or we outgrow the problem through growth, through recruiting. If we have a volume drop in a market, and back then it was maybe, I have one market where it's 300,000 from March to now. That's a huge drop in your P&L. If you think about commission, 300,000 price difference, same house.
Right.
So what do we got to do to make up for it? We need more salespeople. And this is probably, and I'm probably going to get slack for this, this is not the time to probably limit some of your budget. I say you go all in and you take market share because you got your systems dialed in.
When you say this is the time to go all in on what?
On your people. I think on brand, on marketing, on positioning yourself. Like, what is your message in the market, right? One of my great clients, we had to switch his messaging. It was like, we scale top producers fast, right? And now guess what? He's attracting 30, 40, 50, $100 million producers. His pipeline is $1 billion. And for the next 3 months, I just think that it's your mindset, number one. And number two, it's like, what do I need to fix so that I can attract the right people? And sometimes it's positioning yourself in the market.
I just want to capture the tracking element because I think that large teams are very good at tracking and single agents and small teams are terrible at tracking. How can a small team, small to medium, because even I know medium-sized teams that don't track shit. So like how can like you talk to a lot of these large teams that, are running like a business, have like, they might have 2,500 agents. Like, what are key elements that every single real estate agent, real estate team need to be tracking?
I think any business, you need to know what's coming in and what's going out. You need to know what you're spending money on. Bottom line, like that's basic business of like, how does the company, when I look at a business to evaluate whether I'm going to partner with them, invest in them, it's like, how does the business make money?
Yeah.
Who's important in the business, right? Who are my key players? How does, like, what are their expenses? And if I'm going to throw $100,000, $200,000 at it, like, when am I going to get it back? Because is there a model? Is there a system? Or are people free flowing? So if we were going to track anything, it's first, how much money is coming into the business? How do we create that? So like in a real estate business, it's commissions for the most part until they diversify into like mortgage and title and ancillary services. But for the most part, it's commissions, unless they have a rev share, right? Or unless they have other income. And so one of the things that I noticed during that failing time of that brokerage is we had $76,000 in expenses and we were bringing nothing to the table. There was not enough time for me to create the income because it would take 90 days for all these agents to get up and running. So guess what? I created other income and partnerships. And I asked title companies and mortgage companies, I was like, hey, do you want to pay a monthly fee? You can get in front of my agents. And so that kind of, and I started cutting some of the things that was dead weight. So I think one is, how does your business make money? And then looking at your lead sources. I think where the money gets lost in real estate is lead conversion. Like everyone's worried about, like, let me go buy more leads. Zillowflex went down. No, this is a time to actually get better with your business and figure out what other source, what else could we diversify? Why are all your eggs in one basket? Yeah. Right. And so I think it's understanding, like, why are you going to go to this new bright and shiny object of TikTok and this course when you make most of your money from Sphere or most of your money from open houses, right? And like you think, but like, let's really dial that in. Why don't we double down on that, right? Because it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah. Most agents don't, if you ask them, even a decent sized team, they don't have financial meetings with their team leaders or with their, manager. So they don't actually know where their money comes from. They just make guesstimates. Oh, yeah, I think our spheres are number one. And like, you think or right? Like they don't.
So the first thing I would do is go to your broker because they have to track it, or go to the title company that you use and go, can I get a list of all my closed from last year to this year?
Right.
Then I want you to go through all of them. If it's a small team, it might be 100, it might be less than that, it might be 20, but go, where did I get this client from? Was it from an open house? You don't have to have the dollars, but the unit count of like, hey, well, 16 of my 30 came from open houses.
Do more open houses.
Do more open houses, right? Like you don't have to have like, let's go in phases and in steps, because it could be very overwhelming to even think about numbers when you're not making money, when you feel like you're not making money.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, let's just go to the basic of like, and then now you have a list, like, is that in your database, right? So that we could market to them. Are they in a private Facebook group so that you can get on stories or go live with some of your favorite clients? Right? There's a lot of things, I think, especially with technology today and like companies like yours, I think that you can partner up with people. If you suck at it, go find somebody at Fiverr to go do it for you. Go find a VA to go do it for you.
Yeah. Hire Layfed assistant, hire somebody.
Yeah, there's a lot of people you can hire for very, very low costs that are super. I mean, both of our teams are all what you consider mainly virtual, and they work their butts off and they're excited to get paid. They're excited to show up.
They're excited about growth. Yeah, they're excited about growth of the company.
And the opportunities are out there.
Yeah, I think that we came across virtual assistants during the last recession with REOs. Our commission was $500 and $1,000 for a $30,000 property. So you couldn't hire $12 an hour or $10 an hour. You just weren't profitable. So it was like, what is a VA? What can you do? Oh, so you can do my BPOs for me and data entry.
Why do you think real estate agents are so reluctant towards hiring virtual assistants? Because I find that I come up against that often where I'm like, hey, you should hire a VA. Like, you should get an admin. Like, and they're like, I'll do it myself. Like, I come up against that a lot.
Why are real estate agents, maybe the bigger question is not necessarily virtual, but why are they so resistant to hiring in general?
There's a few factors that I see as common themes. One is control. Two is things aren't documented. It's all in their head. They feel like they're already overwhelmed. So to slow down and train somebody when they're high D's for the most part, or high I's, to slow down and train an S or a C and ask questions, it almost irritates them. Right? It's like, just read what's in my head. Well, I haven't yet to see a relationship where you could just read what's in somebody's head and like figure it out. Cause show me that robot, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that like the cost, right? And so sometimes when I've got to get some of these people out of their comfort zone, like, and they have to hire a leadership position or a president for their company, it's like, don't think about the 100,000. Let's think about the 10,000. Right. Can we make it a growth position? Can we actually bring the revenue by him doing certain activities so that it drives more revenue in the company? And if it doesn't work out, you're out 10, you're already losing money in lead conversion as it is right now, more than $10,000.
What would you say are like the top 3 things that you, like when you come into a brokerage that you see, or just a team that you see like mistakes that they're making, and like what, like how, like maybe walk us through kind of like a little bit of your coaching and how you walk them through getting to them to reach their goals?
Yeah. So we use a 5C framework. And the first C is clarity. Do we have clarity on where we're going? Do we have clarity on the vision? Did it change? What's the goals? Do we have absolutely clarity between you and I? And now does your whole team have clarity of where you're going? Because I feel like there's a misalignment. Like they say, I want to make $1 million, but they're treating their staff as if they're like $30,000. Like that's where they're going. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's one. And then 2 is like, do they even have the capacity? I like to look at their time, where they're time wasters. Because even if I was to give you strategies, even if we were trying to get your onboarding up or your hiring system up, if you don't have the time to implement it, it's not going to go anywhere. And you can't put mess on top of mess. It's going to collapse. Right? It's going to burn you out. The reason why we're calling is because you need help and you don't want to have to try to figure it out as much as you've bootstrapped this business. And then the third is like, what core foundations do you guys have in place? How does the business make money? Who is your like ideal client? Are you in the luxury space? Because it's a little different in the luxury space versus your residential versus Canada, right? My Vancouver and Alberta agents are very different than what's happening in California, right? Yeah. So you actually have to look at their core foundation. You have to look at their models and sometimes I'll ask questions like, why'd you build it this way? Right? Oh, because I read this book or I went to this conference and I was like, but it's not working right now. So, and then we go into creating machines. What machines are missing out of their business? And then we collaborate on what works, what doesn't work and we kind of repeat the process because they're always constantly scaling up. And sometimes it's realigning. So when I say core foundation, sometimes I'm looking at all their people and realigning their leadership, or I'm going, they are costing you money. Because if I ask them, what do you do for one of my clients? Or what do you do for the Rainmaker? Tell me about your schedule. Well, I just do things that they tell me to do in my email. Well, okay. Well, and what is that? So when you have nothing to do, then what do you do? Nothing. I get that a lot, by the way.
I had a client last year, so sweet. She had a staff that she had a payroll of like $200,000. And when I went through her CSU, and I said, let's just go through your listing tasks, right? Super easy, Raquel. Let's go through your listing tasks. Oh, okay, great. Booties, me. Flyers, me. Open house signs, me. I said, why do you have 5 people if you do 80% of the, well, she has kids, so she can't work past 11 or 12 or 1 or 3 on these 3 days. So I'm like, so you have to manage in your head, you have to manage her schedule. Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. Let me just write this down. Why can't this person do this? Oh, well, she doesn't like to do it. I'm like, wait a minute. So you have all these people on your team, but nobody actually likes to work. Who helps you get coffee in the morning? She's like, well, I get them coffee. I was like, wow. This is very interesting. I was like, and when we put it on paper and we wrote it out, right? Because when she sees it in her system, that's her system. But when I wrote it out on a big piece of paper, and I was like, this is why you're stressed. This is why you don't have time. This is why you don't have a model. You just say, I don't want to teach or I don't want to inconvenience them. So you're basically making $1 million a year. You're paying out all this money to your people and you're doing all the work, which then capped you at now 600,000 with the team. So when you're solo, you made $1 million. With the team, you're making 6, and you're paying out 30%, 50%, 30, whatever thousand a month to people because she didn't have the foundation. And the funny thing is when I broke it down, Raquel, because we had a long 4-hour session together, it wasn't that she didn't know how to teach. She didn't feel worthy enough of having people work for her because she didn't love herself enough. And when we broke it down, there was a bunch of tears. And then she came back the next day into the office and she cleaned up house. And people are like, what the frick just happened? And she did it lovingly, but she's like, you guys need to do this or we need to part ways. And she parted ways with 2 people. And the 3 stepped up. And she ended up buying time back. She lost 30 pounds because she started going to the gym again. It's so crazy, but the self-belief is really hard because you make a bunch of money. You think, okay, everybody says I need to build a team. You build a team, but then you don't feel worthy to have these people in your life. I've been there. Does that come up at all in your business? Like when you coach your people, do you actually get into like, when you talk about mindset, because this is a mindset thing, how do you take a business conversation and then bring it to the personal side so that they can see it? Like,
I think it's different for different people, just depending on where their mindset is. Yeah. And I think it's having the awareness of like, here's what I'm seeing. Like, let me diagnose, right? As if I was a doctor. Here's our options, right? What do you think our options are? And then where do you want to go from here? And what action steps are we going to put? I think that sometimes people think that building a team is sexy. And what people forget is that there is a small dip in income when you're investing in people. And when you invest in buyer's agents, you're cutting, most of them are on 50-50 splits. You just cut your paycheck in half and more than that with operational costs. So we need them to understand that. So when you don't have standards, you're throwing, all these leads, you're throwing conversion out the door. So I think sometimes like a team is not for everybody and a big team's not for everybody. You can be a solo agent with amazing VAs and still have a life. It just depends on the model you want to build. Just because you think that everybody's building teams one way doesn't mean that it's going to work for your lifestyle. Doesn't mean that it's going to work for your clientele. Sometimes you go through a transaction. I just went in one for an investment and I had no idea who I was talking to, but it made us better at our systems, right? When you go through a customer journey through different things that you're looking at, it makes you better. It makes you better. And I think just having bodies on a team is probably the fastest way you can lose money.
Yeah, 100%. Like they have to be doing something. They have to have a purpose. Like you said, they have to have a vision for the future. If you want to attract high performers, you need to have a high performing vision. And I love that. And I really want to wrap up here with just this question of like, if somebody would want to reach out to you, they're running a large team or, they're a woman in business running a large team, and they want to go to the next level, where is like the best place they can reach you? And what are some assets that they can essentially consume some content from you that will essentially allow them to get a better understanding of how you can help and how can you help is the other question.
Yeah, great question. So I am majority on Instagram. It's Raquel Q. And you'll find a lot of content there. We also have a women's event. We also have a real estate event that we do every single year. We did one this past April. And we also have retreats. So we do a lot of coaching through private coaching, through masterminds, through events, and through retreats. And sometimes I will do masterclasses so that you can figure out, I just did one and I'll probably do another one on 7 key things that you need to think about so that you can thrive in the shift and action steps to get there.